And welcome. Tonight is Monday, February 24th, 2020. This is the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter. It is 7 o'clock p.m. We'll call the meeting to order. Would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda in front of them. I'm proposing one deletion from the agenda under New Business A, the designating name of dog park, and I want to move that to a goal-setting session discussion on March 30th. So that is what I'm going to propose tonight. We can talk about some background on why I would suggest that, but that's what I'm talking about. Is changing that. And I'll give you just the background. Whenever we've had namings of parks or whatever, we've had some really major discussions, and I think we need to do that in this situation. And that's why there's no hurry on it, that I understand, because we aren't close to building this, but that's what I would like to do. So with that change, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor of the agenda with that one change, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next up, we have the minutes from our February 10th, 2020 meeting. Those minutes appear on page 5 through 7. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of those minutes as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we have the minutes from our February 18th, 2020 meeting. Those minutes appear on page 8. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of the February 18th minutes as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we'll address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 9 and concludes with the resolution on page 28 and includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000 to Preferred Communications for 5 laptop mobile data computers for $22,015.25 to Irby Utilities for 2 112 kV, 0.5 kVA three-phase transformers for $24,497 to Resco for 12,500 feet of 1/0 15 kV primary wire for $23,575. A temporary on-sale liquor to St. Peter Booster Club for 401 Union Street for March 28, 2020. A peddler permit to TNT Fireworks for 612 South Minnesota from 6/19/20 to 7/6/20, plus the schedule of disbursements for February 6, 2020 through February 19, 2020. Any questions, comments on the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Now, any questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler.
Aye. Consent agenda is approved. Next is unfinished business, which we have none. We will move to new business. We have removed item A, so we go to item B, the unbudgeted purchase for the fencing for the dog park. Mr. Moulton.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, for about the last 20 months, we have been working with the River Valley Dog Park Association to try to locate a dog park that would be in an area that is not submerged most of the time. We came up with a site. You guys graciously approved that. The next step would be to start working on improvements in this process. Our goal tonight is to ask you to authorize installation of a black vinyl coated fence with 6 gates. We do have competitive bids, the lowest bid being $50,800 from Sunup Construction. They're a company that we've worked with in the past on a couple of different projects. The goal behind this is, the reason that we're here asking you for this is an unbudgeted purchase. We did have some funds in capital improvements that we're working to adjust, but because of the scope of what the fence is going to cost and the other improvements, it's above what we have received for donations. We originally asked the River Valley Dog Park to provide us about $32,000 to get the green light to start. They have accomplished their share of the process, and our goal now would be to make this thing move forward so that we can meet their timing on some of the grants that they have received that have a June timeline for installation. We're going to have to do some things with our budget here that are going to include making some changes somewhere along the line because of the type of expenditure we're asking for here. But we feel that this process here should move forward, and we feel that the resolution on page 32 is worthy of approval.
Questions? Pete, where have we used this before? You said this company or this material?
We've used this material both at the Sunrise Water Tower and at Ramsey Park.
Okay,
Sunup Construction was known by a different name, and I believe they did some work for us at Ramsey Park.
okay, all right. Any other questions?
Pete, could you explain why St. Peter isn't installing it themselves?
Mostly because of the design of the fence and the type of fence that it is. We need a high-quality installation. Our crews have done a variety of galvanized fence installation, but this might be just a little bit too much for us right now with all the things we have planned going into spring.
And this is a vinyl fence, right?
Yeah, this is a vinyl-coated fence. We want to make sure that the warranty is there and it stays there with the material.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Not, the resolution authorizing purchase of vinyl fencing, guards, and gates for the dog park at 1125 North Swift Street appears on page 32. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions, comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have Pete, and looks like Jeff, for the ADA transition plan acceptance.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, let me give you a little bit of background. Roughly a year and a half ago, you guys authorized us to go out and collect some data using our GIS system and to work with Bolton and Mink Engineering to put together an ADA transition plan. This is a federally required plan. So what this means is cities that complete this transition plan and submit this to the federal government will be eligible for federal funding, or will continue to be eligible for federal funding. We had not completed this federal requirement, and we are very interested in obtaining federal monies for future projects. And so based on the recommendation from MnDOT and other state agencies that do the financing, they said, let's get the plan done. So we worked hard the last few months here to make this happen. Back in October, as you guys are aware, we had a public meeting. We had 4 community members attend that. We took feedback. We also had a couple of council members that attended that, gave us some feedback on issues that they saw out there in the public and wished us to correct. We also then took those comments, added them to the plan, and then from December 13th, 2019 to January 15th, 2020, we opened it up to the public to review. We did make direct contact with several members of the community who had expressed interest in wanting to make comment. No comments were received, or we take that as a sign of approval of they liked how the plan was put together. And as you guys can tell from the information here, it was very nicely done. City staff did the collection of data. We use that on our GIS mapping system, as I had mentioned. So if you're ever out to Public Works on a Tuesday for our engineering meeting, you can see a lot of this data that's right up on our screen, and that is how we'll prepare our plans over the next few years in order to make some of these corrections. What I'll do now is turn this over to Jeff Domross and let him talk a little bit about the implementation and the priorities that we have going forward.
Okay, thank you, Pete.
Jeff? I don't know if everybody here knows you, because I think this is the first time you've been here this year. So if you could tell us, you just said your name, or Pete did, but where do you work at? What's your capacity?
Yeah, my name's Jeff Domrus. I'm with Bolton and Make. I serve as the city's engineer. Been with the city of St. Peter since about 2002 under Tim Luce before that time. So since then, Tim's retired a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, and city council has graciously appointed me as the city engineer. So I'm happy to be here to serve you. So thank you.
Thank you.
As Pete mentioned, the ADA transition plan it was required by federal law for any community that was 50 employees or more full-time. So that's City of St. Peter. We estimated it's anywhere, communities anywhere from 8,000 or above. So to give you an idea, every community had to put these together. Every agency had to put these together. MnDOT had to, the counties had to. But this was all part of the Title II of the ADA transition, or the ADA American with Disabilities Act of 1990. Agencies had until about July or 1992 to get these plans completed. What the plans do is they're intended to, the law is intended not to discriminate against people with disabilities. So I don't know if you've had a chance to read through the law or not, but it's very detailed and what's required for that. But the transition plan, the federal government required the communities put together transition plans, which we are required to do a self-evaluation of our existing facilities, our sidewalks, our ped ramps, everything within the right-of-way, parks, that sort of thing. We didn't inventory, or the city didn't inventory entrances into public, or entrances in the buildings down on Main Street or on 3rd Street or any of that. As part of that inventory, then we're required to actually address which items are non-compliant, non-ADA compliant, and that's what we do. So in the plan, we describe how those were addressed, how those are rated, and recommendations then for making those compliant. Part of the transition plan requires you to develop a plan as to when you're going to get this done, or when you're going to make things ADA compliant. We simply, for our plan, we assume, or we estimated, well, about 30 years, let's estimate, it's going to take to get all this done. It's kind of a challenge in Minnesota with freeze thaw, because I don't think any community ever will be 100% compliant, simply because we get the snow plows that hit curbs, that hit ped ramps. We got building equipment that runs over sidewalks and damages those. So over time, the idea behind the transition plan is you document that sort of stuff so you're aware of it, and then you can make corrections in the future. But ideally, the goal is to make those corrections, as we pointed out, probably about every 30 year, or over a 30-year period, with the goal of being 100% compliant, ADA compliant. I'm trying to think what else. We did put some cost estimates together, and I just want to caution you on those. Those are just planning level cost estimates. Those are based, and I should back up. The city facilities in general, we've got about 56, a little over half of our pedestrian ramps throughout the city are ADA compliant, meaning they contain some sort of warning system. They were at the appropriate slopes. They had the appropriate cross slope, the appropriate landing area, and then they were the proper length and that sort of thing. So there's a number of factors that go into each one of these things.
So that was 56%.
56%,
Right.
correct. Then about 77% or more than three-quarters of our mainline sidewalk and trails, that's the portion that runs in front of your homes, if you have sidewalk in front of your home, and any trail systems throughout the city. So we're doing quite well there. That's over 77%. We do check for ADA compliance there, meaning there isn't any cracks or any vertical deviations of more than a ½ inch. Anything that's more than a ½ inch is not considered ADA compliant. Anything greater than a ½ inch of space is also the same thing. It's got to have no more than 2% cross slope either. So that's it's fairly flat. And then finally our crosswalks, those portions of the roadway between the ped ramps, a good 62% of those were ADA compliant. One of some of the biggest things we saw in the city's inventory for non-compliance for crosswalks was maybe there's a lip of bituminous right by the curb, the lip of the curb when you're crossing the road that sticks up a half of an inch or something like that. And those are the challenges we have as a city, because when we do seal coats and that sort of thing, you add just a small lift there, and when you get more than a half inch, it makes it non-compliant. So, as I mentioned, these are planning level costs. We estimated, could cost upwards of 4.8, don't get me wrong, 4.8 million. This is over 30 years, what we estimated. These are conservative. These are based on a contractors, the city hiring a contractor to come in and do that work. There is a lot of cost savings here if the city chooses to do this work themselves. Some of this stuff, and I don't know if you want to mention that or
Sure.
not, but
Yeah, part of what we would do is, under our normal assessment policy, we're responsible for the intersections and alleys and different abutting properties there. We also have the ability to go back to private property and ask them to correct those deficiencies within their area. Our goal would be to divide into different areas and then work with a 4 to 6 block area for compliance issues, because it is going to be a funding issue. You guys allocate, the council allocates quite a bit of money each year in the street budget, so you'll probably see this as a line item in there as far as here's what we need to do in this certain area to bring that up to speed. We'll also correct things when we're in the area doing utility work. So if there's a chance that we can come across something, you'll probably see us come back with a request of that. I think you've probably read most of what's in the ADA transition. What we're here to ask you tonight is to approve the resolution on page 80, and Jeff and I are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Steve?
Pete, you and Jeff, I do have to compliment you on this report. It really is comprehensive. I really am impressed. And it does come with a lot of money, and I understand that. So, and years of the communities I've lived in, St. Peter is probably one of the most accessible for public infrastructure that I've lived in. So I really compliment you, Pete, Jeff, and our city for the fine work that you've done. And it's good to see that Pete Moulton is our ADA contact coordinator. I also have to appreciate what you've done when I mentioned issues, Pete, and you've addressed them. So I really have to say that I appreciate what you're doing. And it's not just for me, it's for anybody, young mothers, folks that are seniors, anybody that has an ambulatory problem gets benefit from this plan. So thank you very much from my perspective.
Anyone else? Gary?
I have a comment and a question. My comment is I appreciated the efforts to reach out to other groups that would have something to say on the matter, and I want to be able to have access to looking at this plan. I know that we didn't receive anything online for comments, but we had some people show up. Did those advocacy groups or those groups who have a special interest, did they email or participate in any other way that you know of?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I can answer that. Yes, we reached out to a number of senior housing facilities, those that we knew that were interested. I know a few around town that are, wheelchair bound, or so we reached out to quite a few groups in that respect. I know we did. Once the draft plan was put together, we had posted that on the city website for a month or so for comments, that sort of thing. What's good about the plan is that, as Councilmember Graham's mentioned, is, Pete is the contact for the plan. So if there is anything that comes up along the way that somebody sees something, a deficiency, please bring it to Pete's attention, because that's the idea behind the plan. It's comprehensive. It's got every single thing, most of everything in there that we can think of. But there might be a few things that pop up here and there, and there may be a few things that that people can take care of themselves by simply removing the weeds from the sidewalk cracks. That alone will cause a non-compliant ADA rating on a section of sidewalk if you got weeds that are greater than 3/4 of an inch tall. So, simple things like that can remove a lot of this stuff. But the cost estimates assume that contractor would be hired to do that. So, to put it into perspective, it's a big number, but it's not, not as bad. It's not terribly bad, I guess. I mean, it's bad, but it's not as bad as it looks. It's bad, but it's not as bad as it looks.
I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So after, the spring thaw, we see some unevenness in the sidewalk. What is the maintenance that we're able to do? Is it kind of for lack of a better word, shaving down the sidewalks? We regularly do that?
We usually do not. We would hire a contractor, so we try to get a group of homeowners together to say, you have 10 linear feet, would you like us to try to pull this into a contract to get a better deal on it? And one of the things Jeff mentioned is we are looking at a machine like that the city staff could run at a set price to try to help with compliance issue for homeowners. They really lack the resources a lot of times. It isn't that they want that sidewalk to be out of compliance, it's just they don't know who to contact, where to contact. So if we can't help them, a lot of times it doesn't get done. So our goal is to try to make things easy for the homeowner, let them know the cost up front, and then work with that.
Yeah. And the winter sure doesn't help.
No.
I had that
Thank you.
shaving done on a couple of properties here over the last few years, and there's, I think it's from New London, Spicer, I think, or somewhere up in that area. And it was very reasonable compared to replacing whole sections of
Right.
sidewalk. Follow up on Carrie's question, Jeff, with your experience, or maybe someone else in your firm, the response you got from people here and groups, is that comparable to other towns? Do you know offhand?
We actually had St. Peter had, with our group's discussion that we had a very, very good turnout, and we got a lot of good compliments. Or not a lot of good compliments, a lot of good comments.
Uh-huh.
But that too, I'd like to say, but no. But anyway, I know one gentleman here, when we never realized it, but he was having trouble getting from where he lives on the west or south side of town to the community center in downtown area,
Yeah.
simply because sidewalk wasn't there on the side of the road that he lived on
Right.
Washington Avenue here. And so we learned a lot from people, and it was very, very helpful to have those groups there.
Okay.
But we did invite, there's a list in the packet, I don't have it off the top of my head, but there's a list of the different groups that were invited in the report,
Okay.
the plan.
I have, on pages 47 and 48, you have 14 pictures of sidewalk or other things. Are those actually from St. Peter, or are those just examples?
Who's there?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are examples to give you an idea,
Right.
but not.
But they are necessarily from
No.
St. Peter? Okay.
No, I tried to get some in there that were from St. Peter, but you don't have anything nearly that bad. There's a few, but they're still non-ADA compliant.
Okay. Well, I didn't think they were, because I saw there was a moose or something in the background. Anyway, besides that, any other questions? Steve? Oh, sorry.
I'll go next.
You're absolutely right about the winters, Jeff, that we do suffer from here in Minnesota. I can use myself as an example. Last Monday, when we had our workshop, I came to the senior door, and the snow, the sidewalks heave a lot in the winter. And I knew that, and I don't make an issue of it, but trying to get in the door for the senior center, that door, I couldn't get in it because the sidewalk had sunk about an inch.
Yeah.
I got stuck right on that curb. So Shannon was opening the door, and then this young boy that was about 10 years old, he started pushing, and I almost flipped out of my chair. And I said, well, let's turn this buggy around here and then pull me in. And that worked just fine. But that's an example. Now the summer will come and it'll shift back up and it'll be fine. It's just, it's the lay of the land in Minnesota.
That's great.
So, yep.
Shanad?
I just was grateful at how and impressed how comprehensive the plan is. I'm wondering when and how the plan will be reviewed, and will it come back to us when substantial, sort of non-editorial changes need to happen?
That's one of the things we haven't worked out yet. We did give, the report did give some targets. So we had said at 10 years, we want to be about a third finished. And so what we need to do now is set out that 10-year plan and kind of talk about what funds we have available to work with this stuff, where we're going to do utility work, kind of plug and play with some of those issues there, what we can take care of ourselves at very or little expense, and then what we need to have done by a contractor, and then where we got to contact homeowners. So this meets the first requirement, and now the work has to happen.
Thanks.
And maybe we can give you a report at one of the goal sessions, whether it's this summer or earlier in March, whatever.
The city's going to maintain ongoing with their GIS system. You'll have to stop out to Public Works and take a look at that sometime, but they're able to keep running tally of things that they get done and things they do. So hopefully there's a lot of those spots that are red on the drawings that will actually will turn green with just simple things that the community does, and the homeowners and the city, the projects that they do around town as they go do improvements around the city.
Okay. Anyone else? The resolution adopting Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA Act, transition plan and inventory for public right-of-way appears on page 80 and 81. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions, comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Thank you,
you.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a property casualty insurance coverage modification, and Sally is here tonight.
Mayor Zeman and City Council. I'm here tonight just to talk about the modification of our annual insurance policy through the League of Minnesota Cities. This insurance covers, as we talked about, all property that the city owns, buildings, park buildings, playground equipment, structures, vehicles, contents of all the buildings. There's a separate rider for mechanical breakdown for the power generation plant and substations. It also covers our open meeting law coverage. As we said, the League of Minnesota Cities is offering the coverage. It's a comprehensive plan that the league offers to, and they cover about 1,000 different cities within the state of Minnesota. It's a nice, the league is able to offer for everybody and all of the property. If we would go out individually, we'd have to go and get different quotes from different insurances. So that's why we stick with the league. They know what they're doing. It's a seamless process and it works really well for the city. We are also part of a pool with the 1,000 cities. So as we pay a premium in each year, if the revenues or the costs are not, if they have a surplus, as you're used to hearing on the news, they will give that back. In the last over the last 20 years, we have gotten dividends back from the league, anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 a year, depending on what happens within that pool. So the league does offer us good coverage, and we would like to stay with those. In 2019, the premium for our annual coverage for $50,000 deductible for each incident and an aggregate of $100,000 deductible. So what that means is, say you had 10 incidents at $10,000 a piece. Once we hit that $100,000 in total aggregate, we would be covered and we would not have any more out of pocket. Now, we'd have to pay the $10,000 for those individual 10, but after that, we would not. Or if you had a $25,000 and some smaller ones, until it hits $100,000, you make up that difference for each of the incidents going forward. The premium last year for that coverage was $181,692. When we went out and got that quoted for 2020, there was a 9.5% increase to $199,582. Mainly driven by just an increase in insurance liability premium of 4%. Our auto did decrease by 9%. And then we had a 15% in property. And most of that was driven because we took the Veterans Memorial down at Minnesota Square over from the Legion. So that was a $900,000 piece of property with a lot of, with the structure, so we had to cover that this year. So that drove the largest increase. So with that 9.5% increase, I did go back to the league and say, what can we do to lower that annual premium? What type of deductibles can we look at? And they gave us two quotes, one at a $75,000 per incident with the aggregate staying the same at the 100, and the annual premium would decrease by $14,585, or down to $184,997. And then they also gave us a $100,000 deductible individual incident and a $100,000 aggregate. That only decreased from the $75,000, another $3,681. So what I'm proposing we do is stick with the $75,000 deductible, save the $14,000, and then the city's exposure at the most would be $10,415 at net. So I think that's the biggest bang for our buck right now. If we look back at the last 5 years of premiums, of claims, we have not had any claims over $50,000 except 1 year, and that was part of the mechanical breakdown. And that's already covered on a separate policy. So I think we'd be good at covering it that way. I also asked the league to look at some excess liability insurance for federal employment claims of $1 million, and that cost would be $20,975. I do not think that is worth the coverage right now. We haven't had any claims or anything else, and I don't think it's worth the $20,975 annually. So what I'm asking you to approve is on page 85, the resolution for modification to the annual property insurance and casualty to a $75,000 deductible per incident and a $100,000 aggregate deductible, and declining the excess liability for federal employment claims.
Okay.
Any questions?
Anyone? Steve?
Well, first of all, this is going to be addressed to you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
I know in our workshop last week, you had mentioned the $100,000 deductible, and I guess I'm surprised it isn't more than that, but what do you feel would be justifiable if we went to 100,000?
What kind of a change, you mean, from one to the other?
Right, that's what I'm asking. Yeah.
I don't know. I wanted to see, but I didn't have any number in mind.
Okay.
I just know personally, when you raise your deductible, it can make quite a bit of difference. In this case, I'm not sure, as Sally pointed out, it was $3,000.
Yeah. I was surprised that it was
difference.
that only additional, not even $4,000 for another $25,000. but-
Yeah. My rationale more, Steve, was more, we haven't had any claims, over 50, so why stop at 75 for the one-time deductible?
Good.
And that was my rationale, is that if we haven't experienced that, we're paying extra for something that we haven't used.
Right.
By history. That could change tomorrow.
That could change tomorrow.
So that's what we have to weigh out.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, any other questions? Comments? All right. The resolution approving the modification to the city property casualty insurance from the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust appears on page 85. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Second by Shannon.
Tie.
Any other questions or comments?
I guess I have one easy question. So we pay our premiums. I was noticing on the disbursements list, we pay that how often?
Semi-annually, and the one that was on the disbursements was workers' comp right now.
Okay.
That was the first half of workers' comp, and then we will get a premium. Once we get this approved, they'll send us a premium, and we'll pay the first half of that.
And then they adjust it based on the decision that is made?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, but workers' comp was the one on the consent
see.
agenda tonight.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
No problem.
Anyone else? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Grahams,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Next up, we have a business license application. Chief, are you there?
I'm here.
You gonna tell us what this is?
I'm here. Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a new business license application, which is why it comes to the council. If it's a renewal, they go on the consent agenda. And so as you see, it's for a tree service and license for a year. We do on anyone who applies for a business license, we do a background investigation, which is required by city ordinance, and so that's obviously good. And there would be nothing to prohibit this particular tree service in town.
Okay, questions? Steve?
Chief, what are you looking for when you do a background check?
It's very limited depending on what the license is for. So if it's a liquor license, for instance, we can look deeper into that. We can look at other states. To comply with Minnesota and the FBI, for this type of business license, we can only look in-state. So if there are any in-state issues, we can't go out of state.
What kind of a situation would negate the person, your recommendation not to approve?
Well,
this?
I'll give you one example, might be when we had a tornado. And you had, people come into town and were not backgrounded. And you have, the mayor has lots of black walnut trees that disappear. So that's the kind of thing really with a tree license we're trying to avoid. Or they may have had some other issue in another community that they can't be licensed.
Okay.
Fraud, we probably would not want a sex offender knocking on your door.
Especially with a chainsaw.
Especially with the chainsaw. So it runs, there are lots of things, and once we do one of these, also they are notified if they are denied a license, and then they have the right to appeal that. And you would be the ones that would, well, city administrator, but they could certainly appeal it to the city council.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Chief.
Anyone else? The resolution approving the new business license to Bryant Straub, doing business as Pumpkin Hill Tree Service, appears on page 87. Is there a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Any other questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports. I'm going to do the one here before I forget. I think earlier when I was talking about the deleting or the new business, item A, I think I said on our March 29th goal-setting session, that is actually Monday, March 30th is the date. So if anybody's hopefully watching later, if they are planning to attend. The other thing I have is, and Mr. Johnson can speak if he would like to, but otherwise he and I Mr. Ed Johnson, attended the House Committee that looks at our request for our 0.5% sales tax increase for the fire hall. And there were 6 municipalities and counties there today. We were number 5 on the list. I don't know, I think it went, there isn't a whole lot you can say or do. They have information. I was telling most of the people earlier that if we don't get approved, I think there's going to be a lot of communities that aren't going to get approved because we were pretty succinct. There were some of them that were quite vague, not vague, but yeah, vague as to what they were going to be using the funds for and that from that regard. So Ed, I don't know, did you have anything else you wanted to say about it?
It was interesting. Never been to anything like that before, so.
Yeah.
And Todd had sent a pretty good letter up there before we got there, so a lot of them were informed on.
Yeah.
They had a couple questions for us, but
Yeah, I want to, and I thought about this after we approved it, and I voted not to approve it for a 0.5%. I want to compliment the people that did approve it for a 0.5%, because I got out of it today was if we would have went for more, I think they would have considered it, but some of the questions that were asked were, aren't you guys going to contribute something to this? You know, why are you taxing for all this? And I think, Carrie, maybe you had said, or somebody said, this 0.5%, would be probably our best chance for success at the state level and locally, for getting approved. And I appreciate that, those comments, and I think they rang true today, unless I'm really misread, because that was a lot of questions. One of the representatives asked that question, a very similar question to everybody that was there. How are you how come you're expecting your citizens to pay for all this? Don't you guys ever have any reserves or anything like that? So, anyway, want to thank you guys for that. With that, I will turn it over to the chief, who is here for Mr. Prafke.
Well, I'll turn it over to your city administrator, Mr. Jim Brandt, who's here to speak about your closed session from the 10th.
Are you your administrator now too, or just attorney?
I moved up the ladder.
What's your name?
The last session, we had a closed session. We discussed the stormwater ponds and ways to sell, options to sell, and various different options. And there was no consensus, just a discussion, which I think was helpful. But it was more looking at how to sell, potential sale prices, and hopefully moving forward.
Okay. Next up, I guess I can take this one. City county meeting discussion. Carrie, Steve, you guys there?
We
You
were
want to
there.
share with, I don't know, unless Todd had some notes on it?
No, he did not.
So I don't, but do you want to share what?
You know, it was my first one, so it was a lot of listening. But we did talk a little bit to follow up about the library funding, and, you know, the city committing to doing more data collection about out-of-town residents who use the library to help perhaps request funding and have it be more data-driven, so that the county can hopefully come together for that. But we talked about a number of things, a couple roads, and primarily the discussion was about roads since we had their engineer there.
From my perspective, you really have to really compliment Mr. Prafke for his ongoing diligence and positive approach to dealing with other members of the county. Sometimes the message is given in all earnest, but it is not necessarily received in such a manner. So I do compliment Mr. Prafke for his hard work and continued efforts. So,
Carrie, that was your first meeting, so we'll give you next meeting, get them all straightened out.
I'll get them all straight.
All right, the next thing on the list is the presidential nominating primary, and Barb, you want to talk about this?
I can talk about that.
I wanted to say,
Oh, you had
I
something to
wanted
add?
to add City Administrator Barb Luker.
We've
So,
changed a lot with
March
that.
3rd, we'll be having a presidential nominating primary. It is replacing the caucuses by legislative action that happened in 2016. So there's two important things to know about this special election on March 3rd. It's got the same hours. Polling place for Ward 1 voters will move back to the National Guard Armory. They're done with their renovation, and so they're happy to welcome us back, and we're happy to be back. Also, voters should know in advance that when you go, you will be required to select one of two major political party ballots, Democrat or Republican. If you do not make that choice and it happens on the roster where you sign your name, you will not be allowed to vote. That is part of this regulation. So people should know that in advance. Also, if they'd like to vote by absentee, the absentees are available at the Nicolay County Government Center up through the day before the election. And if you have election questions, call us at City Hall. We're happy to help.
And Barb, this is just presidential.
Just president, not even vice president, just president.
But is it like no representatives, no, just presidential,
Yeah.
so.
That will be all taken care of by the individual party caucuses. They still
Yeah.
do those for that type of thing. Anyone else have anything they would like to add or share? Steve?
I just want to truly thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilman Johnson, for attending the legislative hearing today. It's extremely important. It's a major funding source for our fire hall that we desperately need. So I thank you both.
Yep. And Mr. Brand was there as the author of the bill, or the resolution, and you have to have somebody there to present you, type of thing. So he was there with us.
And if I could add,
Yeah.
I listened to the audio later after the hearing, and the line of questioning was difficult. And with your level of experience, both of you, I was just appreciative that you were there, because I think that would have been harder for some of us newer council members to respond to that in such a confident, experienced way.
Yeah, it was, I mean, they may, but it's not antagonistic type of atmosphere, they just want to know. I mean, it's just like talking to Sally. So, anyway, but I appreciate that.
They cracked a few jokes between themselves every now and
Yeah, I don't know if half of them get them or not, but. Anything else anybody else would like to bring up? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
then. Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Yeah, you could throw that.